Hello, this is Joan Mazur. I'm a professor in the College of Education, and I've been a faculty associate at the Southeast Center for Agricultural Health and Injury Prevention for approximately the last 20 years. I own a farm in Washington County, Kentucky, a 70-acre farm that my husband and I make hay on our pastures, and have quite a bit of experience with some of the issues and risks associated with farming. Today I'm going to be talking about the behavioral and psychosocial issues associated with farming. The outcomes for this presentation are that you will be able to describe the context of psychological and behavioral risks of farming, that you will know the various risks associated with farming, specifically stress, depression, suicide, and other mental illness documented in the literature. Students will also be able to analyze the relationship between the psychological and the behavioral risks that farmers experience on the farm. Students will be able to describe the influence of culture on behavior, especially as related to issues such as denial of stress and so forth. Students will also be able to identify prevention, education, and direct services that might be assistant to farmers who have psychological or behavioral problems. This presentation is divided into 3 parts, and you will be able to view each part separately, and they take about 20 minutes apiece. Part 1 is an overview and issues for farm families. In Part 2, I examine the literature and risks to special groups and populations that are typically in farm settings: children and adolescents, men, women, and seasonal workers. And in Part 3, we turn to more prevention education strategies to address these issues with public health and safety interventions. This is Part 1, the overview of the behavioral and psychosocial issues in farming, and an overview of general issues for farm families. Although farming is often mythologized as a pastoral occupation and a healthy, peaceful way of life, it is in fact one of the most dangerous occupations. Farms are considered among the most dangerous environments for farmers regardless of age. Young children through seniors are all exposed to risk, regardless of gender or ethnicity. Well documented in the literature is that farming is a physically and psychologically demanding occupation. Geary's work in particular is very focused on that. Working agriculture is characterized by a broad range of physical, biological, chemical, and mechanical hazards and risks, as you've been introduced to in this class. These physical exposures to hazard also have psychological effects as well. Psychological factors then affect behavior through decision making and what we've come to understand as cultural factors as well. In contrast to the serenity associated with the country life, the reality of day-to-day operation of farm enterprises represents, in a real world of volatile commodity markets, prices for farm commodities go up and down depending on weather, demand. There can be catastrophic illness, there can be a blight, drought, all kinds of things affect the commodity markets. And these directly affect the well-being of farmers on the farm. Limited availability of off-farm employment. In years where there are economic downturns, if someone cannot work off the farms to supplement that, that is really a problem. The growing cost of machinery and production. The loss of farm or livelihood due to crop production or failure, which I've just mentioned. And there are also stressors with changing government policy in relation to a range of government and environmental issues. Pesticide use and risk and behavioral interventions for environmental pesticides, for example, is a good example of governmental policies that have changed over the years. When coupled with the on-the-farm injury to a worker or family member, farmers and their families have both physical and emotional stressors that can become overwhelming. Farmers are no different than the general public when it comes to seeking assistance for any personal or family problem, physical or psychological. What are these issues experienced by farmers? Significant psychological hazard associated with agriculture, according to Gregoire's 2003 research, include high levels of stress, depression and anxiety, and increased rates of suicide. I don't think many people associate high rates of suicide with farming, and yet they are increasing over time in the last several decades. How are farmers uniquely exposed to these risks? What are the factors? Farm families are in particular affected as a group by psychosocial and behavioral risk factors. Farms are often a location for both work and health, and this situation has mental health implications. Blurring of roles between work, home, and family can cause issues for farm family members. The proximity of family members can be supportive, or it can mean added responsibilities. In addition, for example, to just dealing with your own family members, your work crew of family might include an aging senior member that requires special attention or care, even in the conduct of work. Conflicts in intergenerational roles can occur. Sometimes it's very difficult for the senior members of a farm family who've been working that land for sometimes 40 or 50 years to give over the reins to new family siblings or their children. They can resist new technologies, new ways of doing things, and this really can cause intergenerational conflicts as these roles shift over the time horizon of a family's life on the farm. Family problems can become work problems or the reverse. Rivalries among siblings or favoritism can take on an added weight in the context of a corporate farming or even a family farm operation. Most research has been on two-generational farms, and it is often the younger generation who have suffered the most in this calculus. Younger generation farmers have particular issues as they look forward to their life horizon on the farm. There's really no retirement age or a culturally accepted one, and it tends to position younger farmers in a dependent role for much longer than they may desire. Being the youngster in a farm family, when you look ahead and you're 45 years old, can really cause issues with self-efficacy, just general frustration with really getting on with your adult life. The passing of ownership and rights also often cause a lot of tension. An Australian study found that 63% of farm families had not discussed farm inheritance or ownership succession at all. Now, it's not typically something, that regular families discuss, like who's going to get the family house if dad and mom pass away. And these things cause conflicts in regular families. But when there's been a farming operation where all of the farm family members have contributed substantially to that farm operation, the notion of who gets what takes on economic as well as social and personal and intercultural and intergenerational conflicts. Studies have shown younger generation farmers report high levels of stress, dissatisfaction with life, and lower levels of perceived support from other family members. Daughters-in-law, in particular, experience the highest level of stress within farm families. And the relationship with in-laws can often deteriorate the longer the marriage exists. So 5 conflicts within the farm family and mental health are often identified. Conflicts of justice, who has the rightful heir to succession, for example. role conflicts. When the head of a farm family is the great-grandfather or the grandfather, and that person has always been in a leadership role, and as children assume these leadership roles, these roles come into conflict. Identity conflict, being the adult younger child, or the new daughter-in-law on a farm, it's very difficult to locate one's identity in that family. Work-home conflicts and home-work conflicts are conflated when the farm is the location of both of these very important culturally defined aspects of life. And then there are just succession conflicts. Who gets to inherit the farm or farm plots or the various operations on a farm? All these conflicts have a negative impact on the quality of family farm life and thus on farm productivity. And because farms are essentially economic operations, any factor that has an impact on the quality, on the productivity, affects the quality of the farm family life with great increases in tension and stress. The link between moderate family family conflicts and depression and suicide has been clearly made in the literature. But links have also been found between monetary economic issues on farms and suicide and depression, as the work of Malmberg and his colleagues and Simkin and his have found in recent decades. In this next section, we'll be dealing with particular populations on the farm: children and adolescents, men, women, and seasonal workers.